Hello, and welcome to our webinar today. We will be talking about what is Agile. My name is Manjula Bianchi, and I'm the CEO of 3T Systems. Here's a little bit about me. I've worked on Agile projects for over 8 years. I am a certified Scrum Master, and I like to call myself a passion infuser and love to share my knowledge with all of you. So thank you for the opportunity. Today, we're going to talk about the waterfall approach. I will introduce all of you to Agile. We'll talk about what Agile is, an introduction to Scrum, and some components of Scrum. So some Scrum roles, the process, and Scrum artifacts. So let's talk about the waterfall development. Here, as you can see, this is a step-by-step approach. You have the requirements, then you design, develop, test, and maintain. It's a very traditional approach to software development. Here, you're going to complete one phase before you move on to the next. And generally what happens is you never really go and revisit the previous phase. Once it's completed, you're done. Which means whatever you have to do, it better have been perfect. Because most of the time, if you don't catch the issues during the first phase, then you're not going to catch it until the end of the project. So the waterfall approach has its own risks that it comes with. First, if there are changes to requirements, generally that's not taken on so well. People are not receptive to changes in a waterfall approach. Development does take a little too long, and testing may be skipped, and then you just go to maintenance. So here you don't really realize the value of the project until the end. And also testing is generally done towards the end of the project as well. And really that close relationship, you don't really have that so much in a waterfall approach. That's why it makes it so risky and costly, as well as less efficient when we compare it to the Agile approach. So with that being said, let me introduce you to Agile. What is Agile? Agile is about enabling business results. It's about an approach to product development. It's not really a specific method, nor is it known as an Agile method. Really, when you think about Agile, it's about its values that it has in its manifesto and the principles, and putting those into practice. So what does the manifesto say? Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Responding to change over following a plan. Our Agile methods include extreme programming, or known as XP, Scrum, which is what we're going to review today in this webinar, our lean software development, Kanban, DSDM, Crystal methodology, and FDD. So all of this falls under the Agile umbrella. Now let's take a look at the Agile manifesto and assess each of those statements right here and compare it to what this means and what the difference is between Agile and project management. So in Agile, it says individuals and interactions over process and tools. What we know in project management, even based off of the PMBOK, all we see is a whole lot of processes and tools and techniques. That can get a little overwhelming, and we know that. And sometimes there's more value given to processes and tools versus individuals and interactions. What about having a working software over comprehensive documentation? How many of us work in an environment where you are given many, many documents to draft and review and create, and then they go through several revisions before you can even start the development of your software. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Here you're going to keep your customer very close in an agile environment. Versus in a project management environment, you have those firm contracts. Your scope is determined right up front. And generally, if there's any change to the scope, well, we're going to have to revise that entire contract. I know you guys agree with me. We've all seen this in a waterfall environment. How about responding to change? When it comes to Agile, responding to change is what we do. We're going to remain agile. We're going to be open to receiving new requirements. We are going to be open that requirement priorities may change. However, what we know of project management in a waterfall approach is that generally you have all your plans up front, right? You guys all know that. And then you follow those plans. And guess what? If someone comes to you with a change, well, that's not something you're going to take lightly, are you, in a project management environment? Now let's talk about Scrum a little bit. I want to talk about its history first. It goes back to 1995. There was analysis of common software development. So some individuals kind of sat around the room and said, hey, you know what? What we currently have doesn't really work. It's not suitable, it's unpredictable, and it's a non-repeatable process, right? What's what we know about the waterfall approach? So they said, let's create a new method, and they called it Scrum. So if you want to check out Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schreber, please go ahead. These are just some awesome guys. And then later on, it was enhanced. Scrum was enhanced by Mike Beadle. And then there was a combination of it. So what we see is that Scrum itself has evolved over time. But in 1996 was the first time that Scrum was actually introduced to the Object-Oriented Program Systems, Languages, and Applications Conference. So that was the first time when the world heard of Scrum. And then in 2001, there was actually its first publication, Agile Software Development with Scrum. I definitely ask that you guys go to www.scrumalliance.com, check out that manifesto. And now there's thousands of companies who have applied Scrum to their projects because there are benefits to it. So let's cover a little bit in terms of, well, what really is Scrum and what it is not. Guys and gals, Scrum is a simple framework that can be understood and implemented in a short time. An approach to managing complexity. A collaboration effort that enables an engaged, ongoing dialogue. Don't we all love to dialogue with each other and resolve issues instead of having to wait for a bi-weekly meeting? Most popular Agile method used today is Scrum. And the industry standards, the roles, tools, and certifications are all supported. You have the Scrum Alliance behind this method. And really, the culture change, it has to be a culture change before it is implemented across your project. So, and now let's talk about what Scrum is not. It is not a methodology. It is not a license to do no documentation. Remember, you still have to do a little bit of documentation. That's always needed, but not to an extent where it's overwhelming and hindering your software development, what you're supposed to do, which is develop software. Again, it's also not a silver bullet for all areas of software development, right? It's not the key for everything. And also, it is not a framework which provides detailed plans for every contingency. Hey, what we know about the project management or the PMBOK teaches us, we have contingencies such as the management reserve, the contingency reserve. We have a fallback plan. We have a plan for our fallback. I mean, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H plans. And so we know that that does not exist in an agile environment. Well, what happens when you're working on Scrum is that you have what's called iterations or sprints. These are time blocks. They're generally maybe 2 to 4 weeks long. And this is the time where you're busy doing that work and ensuring that the requirements that were prioritized for this time block or sprints, that work is done, completed. And then at the end of that, you have what you're releasing is of value to your customer. Here's what we do in Scrum. A, the project and product is described as a list of features in the backlog. The features are described in terms of user stories. Here's what we want to get done, and here's what the user wants to happen when they click on button A. So you go and you create a list of requirements that go in your backlog. They're prioritized, the results are ranked and weighted, and then you have a list of your features that creates your roadmap. Then you're going to estimate that work. You're going to take each requirement and say, this is going to take about an hour, or it's going to take about 2 hours. And what you do is you actually give these points. And the way to manage your requirements and your backlog is through daily Scrum meetings. And we'll talk about that a little bit in our next slides. But first, let's look at this process. If we look at right here, we have the refinement, which is all of our requirements. We have our roadmap. We're going to know exactly what's going to be released. We'll do our sprint planning. You see the people working hard here. You have your sprint backlog. And guess what? Every sprint, like I said, is about 2 to 4 weeks long. But right on top, you see that 15 minutes of daily Scrum stand-up that supports that sprint. So every day, you're going to get on those team meetings and ask some questions, and we'll review that in a minute. And at the end, like I said, you're going to have a product that's usable, that brings value to your customer at the end of each sprint. And here's a picture of that backlog. Simple Excel sheet will do. Some people use fancy tools like Jira, Atlassian, Rational Tools. Really, there's a lot to support you in terms of running a successful Scrum and also having a backlog that's interactive. And now let's talk about who really is made up of the Scrum team. You have a lot of folks. Generally, you try to keep it at about 15 individuals on the call because it would be more manageable. But your Scrum team will have business and system analysts, some developers, some of your really high-tech individuals, right? IT folks like QAs and DBAs and your UI and UX designers. And then you as a Scrum Master will be on there. When you get your certification, that's going to be your title. So anyone not in an authorized role, an authority on the process, but not the team's boss. So you as a Scrum Master are going to drive the process, but you're not the boss of anyone. And the product owner was part of the team, should have some decision-making authority, but should not be the Scrum Master. Two separate roles here. So what is your role as a Scrum Master? You're going to represent management to the project. You're going to remove impediments, manage Scrum team's relationships with the product owner. You're going to be responsible for ensuring the Scrum is understood and enacted, right? You're the policy holder. You're going to follow the manifesto. You're going to follow the process. Ensure that the team is fully functional and productive. Shield the team from external interferences. The Scrum Master do this by ensuring that the Scrum team adheres to the Scrum theory, practices, and rules. Then you also enable cooperation across all roles and functions. Does that sound fun to you? I actually love being a Scrum Master. And here's another part of your job. Remember those questions I told you early on? Well, here it is. Part of your daily stand-ups, you're going to ask some questions. What did you do since the last Scrum? What are you doing until the next Scrum? What is stopping you from getting the work done, right? What are your impediments? What are your roadblocks? And the Scrum is really not a time to resolve those roadblocks, but the individual hearing it will know that they need to get in touch with Debbie, who just gave a list of roadblocks that she's having. So in short, you're going to have that 15-minute call. The participants will be in there, and you're going to talk about things. And one of the slangs that comes up in Agile is a chickens and pigs role. So here's a little story, okay, about this. So the story is that one day, the chicken suggested to his friend, the pig, they should open a restaurant. The pig agrees and asks, well, what would be the name of that restaurant? The chicken suggests ham and eggs. The pig objects, feeling that the restaurant will be a much bigger commitment for him. He will have to be slaughtered while the chicken only has to lay the eggs. So really the pig and chicken story delineates the kind of people who attend the daily Scrum meetings. The pigs are those who are on the chopping block, the committed people who have stakes in the project and are essential to its success or failures. The chickens are those who attend the meetings, but really have no direct relevance to the update or meeting the project progress. Thus, the chicken has the people who have something to say, but usually have nothing to contribute. And considering the meeting eavesdroppers, right? Chickens usually comprise of 50 to 80% of attendees at any given meeting. So that's the analogy behind chickens and pigs. I wanted to add that in here just to have something fun you guys will know and can share with others. And let's talk about some of the things that you shouldn't do on a daily Scrum. Don't try to problem solve. And it's really not a way to collect information about who's behind the schedule. It is also not a team meeting and or a time where you're asking for commitment. Your Scrum Master does track the team's progress, but really the main job is to understand the roadblocks. And now let's talk a little bit about the product owner. You guys ready? This is a pretty extensive role, and it has its own certification. So you can choose to be a Scrum Master or a product owner, or both. You can get certified in both, but remember, you can only have one role on the project, either a Scrum Master or a product owner. And if you choose to be a product owner, here you're going to be accountable for the business, for the value that the team brings and the results. You're going to be the primary interface with the stakeholders and can be the subject matter expert. You will have the vision for the product, its releases and sprints. You're going to maintain and prioritize the backlog. You're going to determine what product the team will build and drive the team at a sustainable pace. You're going to seek guidance from the development team, and you will also have a final say on the work product. And you can accept or reject work results. Here's a little hand drawing of what a product owner does and their role in a Scrum. Like I said, you're going to be the subject matter expert. You will be the owner, so you really manage the process and the product. And that's really the role of a product owner, an important one, working right beside a Scrum Master. I want to touch on Agile ceremonies. I talked about some pillars of Agile that really, if you want to implement Agile at the workplace, you can't pick or choose. You should really have and implement all of these, which is you should have sprints or iterations. You should have sprint reviews, daily stand-ups, and release planning. That's just part of Agile. You can't pick one and not the other. Here I want to talk a little bit about product backlog. It's an important aspect of Agile. Here you're going to have the requirements for a system expressed as a prioritized list, and it's managed by the product owner. Generally a spreadsheet, I showed you guys that earlier on, usually created during the sprint planning meeting. Can be changed and reprioritized before each planning meeting. So it's very fluid. And you're going to use that to create your team's velocity. How much effort is it going to take to do the work in this sprint? You're going to determine the complexity of the work by giving each story a point. And you could have methods of estimations. You can have an expert review it or create a WBS. And here's a picture of that. It can look like this, and really you could create a WBS that has the epic right on top, and then the epic can be divided into several themes, and the themes are divided into stories. You guys may have heard of a sprint burn down chart. So this is what it does. Total sprint shows you the total sprint backlog hours remaining per day. Shows the estimated amount of work before release. Ideally, should burn down to 0 at the end of each sprint. Actually, is not a straight line, can bump up. And your product burn down chart, this is your overall, is a big picture view of your project's progress. Great, so now that I've given you guys an overview of Agile, Scrum, we talked about the product owner, the backlog, and really in terms of how to run a Scrum project. Now, let's discuss which one's better, or which one should you choose? Waterfall approach or Agile? Does it really matter? I think you have to go back and assess the type of organization you're in and whether they're receptive. Are they receptive to change? And before even doing that assessment, can you apply Agile concepts or processes into your industry? For example, in the construction industry, it really is hard to apply all of the processes or steps in terms of what the Agile Manifesto wants us to do. So you have to take a look at it that way. And in the construction industry, really the waterfall approach works best. And if that's the case, then you utilize the project management approach, the step-by-step approach to run your project. And really, that's when you can decide which one to pick. And that decision needs to come from the assessment that you're going to do. However, the good thing is that you can combine the waterfall approach and Agile. And as you can see, the PMBOK has done that. The PMP certification has evolved to now include major Agile concepts. So now when we're looking at project management, where it does have a set of plans, it says that don't do all of those plans if you don't need it. And there's now more emphasis in stakeholder engagement, involving them in every step of the project, which is key. And as you can see, standards have changed. The Project Management Book of Knowledge is a standard that now incorporates Agile in it. So I think that there is the best of both worlds that you can take and utilize. So take a look at your industry, see if Agile works, and if you can combine both Waterfall and Agile in your organization. Hold those brown bags, talk about the benefits, talk about what Agile is, and see if you can combine it and bring it on and bring about a change. Hopefully that will, where you will have more successful projects. So how do you find out more information about Agile? You can go to www.scrumalliance.com. You can check out the Certified Scrum Master certification right on there. And hopefully they're going to have some links to some classes that you can take as well. And then you can also learn about 3tsystem.com. I actually teach the project management professional certification course, and I do put a lot of emphasis on Agile within my courses so that my students understand that you can truly take the traditional approach of project management and combine it with Agile for more successful projects. And we can call that a hybrid approach. I hope that you guys all enjoyed this webinar. And at this time, I would really love to take your questions.